both they've just both been clicked on to go live, so Bismillah.
All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Respected elders, beloved brothers, welcome to another webinar with the National Zakat Foundation. And today, inshallah, we're going to go through some of the fundamentals of the subject of zakat. And inshallah, we'll cover the basics of in terms of why the zakat has been obligated upon us and when does it become an obligation, etc. And we'll look at what sort of assets in our day-to-day lives are zakatable that should be considered for extracting zakat on them. We'll also look at some of the liabilities and other things that we can deduct from our total zakatable wealth, inshallah. And then we'll jump on to the online calculator that we have on the National Zakat Foundation website. And we will go through that calculator, inshallah, step by step, and I'll come up with examples and basically input it into the calculator, practically showing you guys how you could put or calculate zakat on various applications, inshallah. So without further ado, let us proceed, inshallah. All right, so to start with, the definition of zakat, essentially, from a linguistic perspective, it means blessings, an increase in wealth, purity of the wealth, rectification, etc. Those are the meanings from a linguistic perspective. It didn't have to do with the wealth. Legally speaking, it is an obligatory charity that is due annually upon Muslims, and the evidence for that legality is based from the Quran and the Sunnah, and just a few of those evidences we can talk about, inshallah. Now, so the Quranic verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 43, is وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَارْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ, and establish the prayer and pay the zakat and bow in prayer with those who bow. So that is a direct command from Allah Azza wa Jal in terms of zakat. Then there is also the hadith of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which essentially makes it a pillar of Islam, and that hadith is Al-Islamu an tashhada an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah wa tuqima as-salah wa tu'ti az-zakah wa tasuma Ramadan wa tahujja al-bayt in istata'ta ilayhi sabila. So Islam is to testify that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is the messenger of Allah, and to establish the prayer and to pay zakat and to fast Ramadan and to perform Hajj if you're able to. So that basically covers in a nutshell the ruling of zakat from the Quran and the Sunnah. There are many other evidences as well, but in the bid to save time, inshallah, we'll just establish the ruling with those evidences. In terms of the conditions for the obligation of zakat, generally speaking, there are three conditions upon human beings. One is that you have to be Muslim, that's number one, and that you're free. And the other condition is there's a difference of opinion on it. However, it is that you have attained purity and you have the faculty of sense. Other ulama have differed on this point in regards to this, in terms of whether children should pay zakat or those who are not mentally stable should be paying zakat, etc. Well, they don't have to, but others can pay zakat or have to pay zakat on their wealth. Moving forward, what conditions are there for zakat to be extracted upon wealth? Essentially, wealth and other possessions, there are different types, obviously, and zakat is not obligatory on a person's wealth until there are 5 conditions that are fulfilled. And of those conditions, you have complete ownership, essentially, and then the wealth has the ability to grow and increase. And this is a very important point, inshallah. We'll hopefully by the end of the presentation, we'll have an idea of what that means in more depth. The other ones are pretty straightforward, but this point here requires a little bit of thinking. The other one, the third condition, which is the wealth has reached the nisab, and we will cover what the nisab is. It is essentially a threshold, but we'll cover it in more detail soon, inshallah. That it is beyond the basic needs and necessities, and also a 1 lunar year has passed on that wealth while it has been in your possession. The nisab and hawl period that we just mentioned in the conditions is basically a key concept to zakat. Nisab is the specific amount, the specific threshold or the minimum amount that you need to have in a specific zakatable asset or category of wealth to calculate zakat. And the whole, in a nutshell, is 1 full lunar year. So it's an Islamic calendar based year for which a certain amount of wealth needs to pass in order for zakat to become obligatory upon it. Now, in terms of the nisab, the Prophet ﷺ has given us 2 examples of the nisab in terms of the popular type of wealth that you and I will have in this day and age, which is money, gold, and various other types of assets. However, the nisab varies between other types of wealth as well, like cattle, for example. And if you have cattle or you own those kinds of things, you can always contact the National Zakat Foundation and we'll help you, inshallah, with that as well. But in terms of gold, it is the 85 grams of 24-karat gold, which is equivalent as of today to about $7,198. So if you take the gold nisab in terms of your wealth, if you have that much, then you need to extract zakat on that wealth. In terms of the silver nisab, which is the more popular nisab amongst the scholars, and they have recommended the use of the silver nisab because it essentially yields a greater return for the fuqara, for the poor people, as well as it gives you more reward as well in terms of donation. So the silver nisab is 595 grams of pure silver, which is equivalent to about $457 as of today. And inshallah, we'll cover more aspects of nisab as we go through the presentation. In a nutshell, zakatable assets are essentially all possessions that human beings can have can be classified either into zakatable or non-zakatable wealth. So anything that you can think of, that you can hold, that you can see, that is tangible, etc., can either be considered as zakatable or non-zakatable. So personal wealth and assets, for example, money, gold, silver, stocks, money in your pension account or in your investment schemes or in your superannuation, etc. These are all considered as personal wealth and assets. Then you have the same thing, but for businesses, so merchandise, stock, etc. And then there are various other types of wealth which is not very applicable to the general public, but yes, they exist though. Agricultural produce, livestock for commercial purposes, and then various types of treasure like oil and gas, mining of metals and gemstones, etc. The rates on zakatable wealth, I don't want to delve too much into this because it doesn't apply to us, to the majority of the people. However, the zakat does change with time, with different types of. So you have 2.5%. Yes. Well, Bilal, yes.
Brother Khalid, sorry, your slides are not they're not moving along as we're seeing them. Do you mind just re-sharing your screen for us, please, Akhi?
Yes, sure. No worries. Let me just share my screen again. Share my screen. All right, how's that? Can you guys see the slides now?
Yes, Jazakallah khair, now we can.
So do you think there were some slides that were missed? Should I go back to those slides?
Yeah, I believe it was only on the first slide the whole time. It might be worth just doing a quick recap.
Okay, all right, no worries. Let's okay, just let me know if the slides do get stuck again.
Yeah, so they are moving now.
Okay, yeah. So so these are some of the slides. I'll go through them very quickly again. but the recording will be there, inshallah. Then you can match the audio with the slides later on, and we'll share this slide pack as well, inshallah, if Allah wills. So the definition of zakat, essentially, very basically, it is from a legal perspective, it is an obligatory, a mandatory aspect of our religion, and it's a portion of our wealth that is specific to zakatable wealth that needs to be extracted on a lunar calendar yearly basis. The ruling of zakat has been established from the Quran, the Sunnah. Some of the evidences for that is the two verses, as you can see on this slide, and also the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which establishes zakat as a pillar of Islam. And if you look at the Quran, throughout the Quran, you'll find that zakat has always been mentioned alongside salah, which is a paramount of the deen. You have zakat always being mentioned right next to it. So it holds a lot of importance, and it's a very important aspect of our societies and communities. The conditions of zakat upon human beings, there are three essential conditions. You have to be a Muslim, you have to be free, and you have to have attained puberty and or the faculty of sense, although there is a difference of opinion on the last condition. Conditions on wealth to be zakatable: you have to have complete ownership of it. The wealth has the ability to grow and increase. The wealth has reached the nisab, and that it is beyond the basic needs and necessities, and also 1 lunar year has passed on this wealth. The nisab and hawl period are a very important concept of zakat, and the Prophet ﷺ has clarified both of these concepts to us in perfect detail, bi'idhnillah. In terms of gold and silver, you have the 85 grams of 24 carats of gold, and in silver it's 595 grams. Keep in mind that the nisab for various other types of zakatable assets is different. Like for cattle, you have a different type of nisab. So we can help you with that, inshallah, if you have cattle or if you live in various parts of the outback of Australia. Zakatable assets, in a nutshell, there are essentially 5 different categories, although the first 2 categories can be summed up as one. You have personal wealth and assets, and you have the same for business wealth and assets. Then you've got agricultural produce, you've got livestock for commercial purposes, and you have treasure in terms of oil and gas, mining of metals and gemstones, etc. The rate on zakatable wealth, as far as you and I are concerned, in terms of the majority of the people have, which is gold, silver, and merchandise, and various other types of assets that are considered as basically money assets that can be converted to money easily, that is 2.5%. That's the rate that you pay on that type of zakat, zakatable wealth. The zakat anniversary, my brothers and sisters, is a very useful and a very practical method of ensuring that you calculate and you pay your zakat in a timely and conservative manner. And essentially, there are 2 methods of doing this, and both are widely accepted and both are correct. So you have the Hanafi school of thought, which says that you choose one date in the Islamic calendar, and you look at that. On that date, you look at all of your zakatable assets, and you see if it has reached above the nisab. If it has reached above the nisab, then you extract zakat on it. And if it is below the nisab, you don't extract zakat on it. You don't worry about what has happened throughout the year, whether your wealth has dipped below the nisab line or whether it has been above it, etc. You don't worry about that at all. You just look on the day of your zakat anniversary. You just look at what you have, that is zakatable wealth essentially, and if it is above the nisab, you calculate your zakat. If it is below your nisab, the nisab, you don't calculate zakat. Simple as that. The other 3 schools of thoughts, they go to with the view that you choose, you wait until your wealth has reached the nisab or above the nisab, and you set that date as your zakat anniversary date. And then from that point onwards, you wait until 12 lunar calendar months has passed, and if your wealth is still above the nisab, then you calculate zakat and you extract zakat. However, if it has dipped down below the nisab line, then you restart your zakat anniversary. So the moment that it goes down it comes back from the dip. So as in your wealth decreases below the nisab, and then you get a bit more wealth, and that becomes slightly over at or above the nisab. That is your new zakat anniversary date, and you start counting 12 lunar calendar months from there. So essentially, the pros and cons of the methods. The Hanafi method is essentially you don't worry about ever changing your zakat anniversary. You put one date, and every year you extract your zakat. So it's headache free, and you don't have to worry about anything. And this is the method that the National Zakat Foundation recommends the general public to follow. As for the other method, the pros is that it allows you to calculate your zakat a bit more accurately. But however, you have to constantly change your zakat anniversary, and you have to be very wary and aware of what's going on with your wealth to ensure that you do not underpay your zakat. So yeah, both methods are good. We recommend the Hanafi method. The method from that madhab, because that will ensure that you pay your zakat all the time at the right time, and sometimes you'll pay a bit more, but that will be considered as sadaqah in the sight of Allah Azza wa Jal. All right, so very quickly I want to go through some of the rules in regards to various types of zakatable wealth. And then inshallah we'll jump onto the calculator and actually come up with some real examples and start putting it into the calculator, and inshallah get some calculation experience going. So zakat on business, essentially you have three things. You've got zakatable assets, that which you will be calculating the 2.5% on. And then you have things inside of your business that are not zakatable, that should not be considered as zakatable, as in you won't include it in that calculation. And then you have things that are deductible. So these are things that you can deduct from your total zakatable wealth. So in terms of the zakatable assets, these are things like cash, your cash receivables, trade receivables, like you've done some service, some work for your clients, and you've invoiced them and they are yet to pay the invoices. So that money, even though you don't have it, you still have to calculate zakat on that money. And then you've got stock and various types of inventories, etc. In terms of non-zakatable assets, you've got like service receivables, your prepaid expenses, fixtures and fittings, any property that you have to buy for your business, plant and equipment or vehicles, intangible fixed assets like copyright, trademark, and various other fees and things like that. Things that you can deduct, these are like outstanding invoices and trade creditors, utility bills, outstanding tax, bank loans, personal or private loans. All of these loans aspects that we did mention here, there is another point to this, inshallah, which we will cover in the later slides. Speaking about business, even though sometimes you might be buying and selling something, you may not be registered, a registered business, etc. But in the sight of Allah Azza wa Jal, some of the things that you and I do are considered as a business, and therefore zakat needs to be calculated on it. And the way you can figure that out is basically understanding the importance of intention of anything that you own, or anything that you do, or anything that you buy, etc. So if you have a clear intention to resell anything that you attain, whether that is a vehicle or a property or some artifact or anything, if you have a clear intention to resell it, then that thing becomes zakatable. You need to pay 2.5% on the market value of that thing every year. And if you have a clear intention for personal use, then there is no zakat on that. If there is no clear intention, then it's not zakatable. If there's a conditional intention, like as in you say if such and such was to happen, or if such and such happens, then I will sell it, or etc. Then in that case it is also not zakatable. If you have a clear intention to resell in the future, but at the moment you're leasing it out, then that is also zakatable. Now that feeds nicely into the subject of zakat on property. Now the general principle in terms of zakat on property is that there is no zakat on property. However, you know, if you buy a property with the intention to sell, as in you get a capital and you invest it in a certain property with the primary intention to increase that capital, to, you know, make a profit, to sell it, etc., then in that case that becomes like the stock of a business, like you're trading. So you have to, you know, calculate zakat on that on a yearly basis, inshallah. So if you buy a property for the primary reason of personal or residential purposes, then it is non-zakatable. If you buy a property for the intention of renting it out, then the property itself is not zakatable. However, the rent that is coming from it will eventually become your savings, and obviously if you've had the savings above the nisab on your zakatable zakat anniversary, then you pay zakat on that money. If you purely buy a property or with the primary intention to sell it, then that is zakatable. As in you're buying and selling properties, like you're flipping a house or flipping a land or flipping a car. All of these concepts, they all fall under this buy to sell, and it's zakatable. And it doesn't matter whether you sell that on Gumtree or online or etc. You have to keep in mind that it is zakatable. All right. And if you're deciding to sell, like you're not sure, then that's not zakatable. If you, for example, buy a property for personal residential purposes, and then you change your intention to sell it, so then we look at, there are two options now. You see whether this intention is to get rid of it. Like sometimes you want to just get rid of something that you own, right? You just want to sell it. You want to move on. Then in that case, it's not zakatable. And even if you wanted to sell it, but to, you know, obviously waiting for the right time to make a to make a profit, then that is also not zakatable. However, if you're intentionally spreading out the sale period and you're waiting for a prices to increase, and basically you're trying to use that money or that investment that you've done, just like how a businessman would look at it, as in purely trying to increase that capital, then that becomes a business asset and it is zakatable. If you change your intention to not sell, like you bought something purely, primarily to sell, but then you change your intention to not sell it, then that is not zakatable. All right, very quickly, let's cover this subject as well, zakat on shares and investments. So in a nutshell, there are basically two types of shares or shares and stock investment, etc. There's short-term trading or day trading, and this is basically within one lunar year. Like you don't spend more time holding these shares than one lunar year. In that case, all of those shares are zakatable on the market value of those shares. So on your zakat anniversary, you look at how much shares you have, you calculate the market value of it, and you extract 2.5% as zakat. In terms of long-term investments, so these are long-term, basically means one lunar year or more. There are again differing opinions between the different schools of thoughts. So you've got the Hanafi school. Basically, they say that you calculate your zakat on your share, on your amount of shares, and basically you have to also look at the company's financial figures as well, like their cash and cash equivalent, account receivables, inventory, etc., to determine the real worth, or the basically to minus all the liabilities of that company from these shares, so that you can get the actual market value of these shares, and then you calculate zakat on this. However, if you don't have access to the company financials, then you use the market value. And in some countries, they have calculated certain factors like 27% or 25%, which you can just apply without looking at any company financials or statements, etc. The other schools of thought, they say that if the company pays zakat, as in if it's an Islamic company, etc., or Muslim owners, etc., and they pay zakat, and you know it, then it's not zakatable. However, if they don't, then it is zakatable, and you can use the method as shown. If you're receiving dividends from your shares and stock, then that income is just like rental income that you receive. You would basically add it into your savings, and then on your zakat anniversary, you look at how much savings you have. If it is above the nisab, then you extract zakat on that. If you are cashing out, as in you're selling all of your shares, then this is also zakatable, and it's only on the amount after the taxes and fees, etc. All right, a juicy subject, zakat on superannuation. In Australia, you have compulsory superannuation, and basically these contributions to the superannuation fund are not accessible until you reach a certain age, and I think it's 60 to 65 years, and then after that you begin to get access to this money. At that time of access, then it becomes zakatable. Prior to that, it is not zakatable. And so once you get access to it, there are two opinions. One opinion is that you pay 2.5% immediately upon access to this wealth, and the other opinion is that you wait for 1 lunar year and you just add it to your savings basically, and look at the on your zakat anniversary and see how if it's above nisab, etc., and calculate the zakat for it. And another point here to keep in mind is that the compulsory contributions, once you reach that age where you're able to access it, they may also you may also put it into another scheme, which then gives you a little bit money every week or every fortnight or every month, etc. However, you need to keep in mind that when you do that, you still have the ability to withdraw all of this money. So you need to understand that zakat is applicable to it at that time every year on the total amount, because it is simply an investment of money, cash investments, and cash investments are always zakatable. So you need to be calculating zakat on that, even though you're not receiving all of that funds. You know, you're only getting a certain portion of it, but there is nothing stopping you from withdrawing all of that money. So in that case, zakat is extractable on it every lunar year. In terms of voluntary contributions to the superannuation fund, they are zakatable every lunar year. So as a young man, if you are putting in a voluntary contribution into your superannuation, you need to be calculating zakat on that if it's above the nisab every single year until you get access to it. So keep that in mind, inshallah. There are other schemes as well from the government, like the First Home Super Saver Scheme, etc., where you put in extra money into superannuation for various benefits, tax benefits, etc. In that case, these are also your choices of you're intentionally taking your money and locking it away. You had that choice. So in all these cases, voluntary and all these other schemes, you are to calculate 2.5% on that amount every single year, because it is zakatable. All right. Yeah, and another question, I think due to the COVID-19 situation, there are early releases of superannuation. So if you manage to attain your superannuation because of the COVID-19 access, then you can you have the same options A and B, whether to calculate zakat on it when you get access to it, or you wait 1 lunar year for it to pass on it. All right, let's cover loans, and then there is one more slide, I think, and then we'll jump onto the calculator, inshallah, and then we'll open the floor to questions so everybody can ask their questions, and inshallah we can try to source some answers for them. In terms of loans, you have weak debt receivables, This is when a person is waiting to receive one of the following types of payments, like wages to be paid, salaries, for example, any rental income. If you're a landlord, you're waiting for rental income to come to you, etc. The ruling on these types of weak debts is that they're not zakatable until the funds are received. So they're not zakatable whilst you're waiting for this money to come to you. However, when you get them, then you will pay zakat on it, and you do not need to backdate the zakat. So this is different to the point that we mentioned about businesses, where you have done work for somebody and you've invoiced them and they are yet to pay you. That is slightly different than this. In terms of strong debt receivable, so this is when a person is waiting to receive money from a loan they have given to someone. So you've got money, you let someone borrow this money. That is considered a strong debt, and it is zakatable. However, if there is no realistic chance of getting the money back, then it is considered as non-zakatable. But when you do eventually get that money back, then zakat is due, and it needs to be backdated to the very beginning. All right. We have now the subject of deductible debts. So debts payable in full within 12 months. Essentially, if you have debts that are payable in full within the 12 months, then they are deductible. Like, for example, incurred expenses to be settled in full within the 12 lunar months. So it is within your zakat year. Anything within the zakat year that is due, that can be deducted if you haven't paid for it yet. Long-term liabilities, like over a number of years, like a mortgage on a house, etc. You can then take 12 months, only 12 months of repayments towards the principal, not towards the interest. And keep in mind that, you know, we advise that you should be finding a Sharia compliant banking company to help you out with these kinds of situations. So yeah, so the 12 months, you can only take 12 months of repayments towards the principal. Any types of areas like overdue payments can be deducted. Whatever is currently due on your zakat anniversary can be deducted. Debts due within the next 12 months should only be deducted if the ability to repay the debt is impacted by the zakat payment. Non-deductible debts. So you have future expenses and bills. You don't deduct them from your zakatable wealth. Like, for example, today is my zakat anniversary, and I sit down and calculate. I have 12 months of rent to pay. I've got electricity bill, this, that. No, you don't. You don't take anything after your zakat anniversary date. Those are future expenses and bills. They cannot be deducted. If something is not payable at all in the next 12 months, then there is no. It cannot be deducted. And anything that is unlawful income or expense, like interest, for example, you cannot deduct that from your zakatable assets. A basic formula for zakat, zakat that is due on you is essentially 2.5% of all of your zakatable assets minus the deductible liabilities. All right, let's jump onto the Zakat Calculator. All right, let me open that website. I'll check the questions as well. All right. All right, so if you go to the National Zakat Foundation website, which is right here, nzf.org.au, and it loads up like this. It's a new website, alhamdulillah. So check it out, let us know, give us your feedback. There's a red button right here, calculate your zakat or calculate zakat. And essentially this takes you to this screen, and you can ask us questions here and pay as well if you already know how much zakat is due. But this little red button here, Bismillah, let's begin. It takes you to the calculator. Now, essentially, before we continue, I just want to mention the calculator has 4 screens, basically. You've got the general screen, you've got the assets screen, and then you've got another screen called the liabilities screen, and you've got the totals. So essentially, this covers what we discussed in that PowerPoint presentation today. It will kind of put a lot of that theory into practice as we go through all of these categories. So to begin, you get a choice of which nisab you want to select, and the scholars recommend silver. So let's go ahead. And in terms of assets, let's choose all the assets so that we can take advantage of the full power of the calculator. And in terms of liabilities, let's choose both personal and business liabilities. All right. So in terms of cash, so here you put all your bank accounts. So if you have a couple of bank accounts, etc., you can put all of your bank accounts here. Let's just go ahead and put one bank account, cash of $10,000, etc. If you have gold, keep in mind with gold, you need to ascertain how much of the jewelry is actually gold. And then secondly, you need to ascertain what's the purity of that gold. Is it 21 karat, 22 karat? Gold is 24 karat, etc. Because you will need to find the equivalent weight of that amount of gold that you have in whatever specification that you have it in, the equivalent amount of it in terms of 24 carats gold. And there's a very simple formula for that, and inshallah we'll be building that into the calculator as well in due time. So let's put in here gold, and let's put about 90 grams of gold. Silver, and the calculator, mashallah, takes the spot price of gold today, and it's all automated, so there's no worries at all. In terms of silver, let's put a couple of 500 grams of silver. All right, business. So another beautiful thing about the calculator is that you have little snippets of information everywhere, and basically that covers that aspect pretty nicely. It gives you a few rulings, gives you examples, etc., and it gives you, it explains it to you very nicely and shortly. So in business, you look at all of your assets, like we mentioned, all of the business assets, cash, trade receivables, etc., stock, inventory. So let's just go ahead and put stock, that is value, market value of it, or the price that you sell it at, and let's just say that's about $40,000. And then also we have some cash on hand in the business, about $3,000. In terms of shares, like we mentioned, you find out the market value of your shares and say you have shares in a certain company worth $5,000. Superannuation, just imagine that you've got access to $10,000 due to the COVID-19 and you would like to pay zakat on it immediately. Then in that case, let's just write COVID-19 super. I know that sounds ironic, but yes, $10,000. All right, property. Say you have a property and you bought this property with the pure intention to make a little bit of renovation to it and then put it back on the market and sell it to make a profit. Now, in that case, that property is zakatable. So we will put that entire property right here, and we will say flip house 1, and let's just put $400,000. So imagine, brothers and sisters, that you didn't calculate zakat while you've been doing dealings and trade with big amounts like this. You'll be in a huge amount of debt with Allah Azza wa Jal. And the minute you realize it, you need to start making amends and start paying off that debt. Because even though you miss zakat, and your reason could be ignorance or you didn't know, etc., etc., the zakat that was due on you is still binding, and it has become a debt on you, so you need to pay it off. And if you do pass away, it is still a debt, and it needs to be paid off by somebody for you. Cash investments, say for example you've reached the age of 65 and you have access to your superannuation funds, and your superannuation funds essentially is invested in a, like, it's pure cash investment. Then in that case, you can put all of your superannuation funds here. However, if it's invested in companies, etc., then you look at how much return it's bringing. You look at it just like how you do with shares and stock, etc. Debts owed to you. Say you have a friend called Bilal and you've given him about $10,000, and he's a reliable brother, but there is no sight of seeing that money anytime soon. You know that he's going to pay. You're confident, but there's no date set. So in that case, you got to put in that full amount every year and calculate zakat on it. It is zakatable. Other assets, for example, if I bought a car and I wanted to sell this car, or I bought a book, for example, and I wanted to hold this book and then sell it, like waiting for a good time to sell it, then this is zakatable because you're trying to do business on it. It's a trade item. You're buying to sell. Then in that case, let's just write book for sale, and let's try $1,000. That's zakatable. All right, and we moved on to the next section, which is liabilities. So in personal liabilities, if I'm prepaying my zakat, as in I'm paying it in advance, then I'll calculate how much rent that is left for me until I get to zakat anniversary, and I can add all that up and subtract it from the zakatable wealth. So say I have rent up until my zakat anniversary of $5,000, and we can put that in there, so that can get subtracted. And say that there's a utility bill that is due for the past 2 months. As in, I'm calculating my zakat today, but I have a utility bill that is due, that is for the past 2 months basically, and it's due. It's with me, but I haven't paid. Then in that case, I can write down the utility bill, okay, and say it's $500. So this can be deducted, and if you click this little button, it gives you a few other things as well that you can look at. Business liabilities, you may have some rent for your business, etc., and you can put that in there as well. That is due on or before your zakat anniversary. Clicking next takes us to the total screen. The total screen, mashallah, is like a report essentially, and you can print this report. You can keep it for safekeeping, and it gives you a nice, a nice report of how you calculated your zakat and all of your zakatable assets, etc., and how much zakat was due on you, and it's a good record basically. And from this screen, you can then go ahead and pay your zakat. You can use a credit card or pay by bank, etc., and you get a tax invoice immediately, which you can use for tax purposes to deduct taxes, etc., at the end. So Jazakumullah khairan, brothers and sisters. This covers the presentation today, and now inshallah we'll open up the floor to questions and answers.
Assalamu alaikum, Khalid.
Wa alaikum salam, brother Bilal. How are you, man?
Not too bad, not too bad. We did have a question coming through Facebook, and if anybody else has a question, if anything was unclear, feel free to ask, inshallah. So the question from Facebook is from Brother Sharif. Can you shed light on past year's calculation method? It's based on money that has stayed in your account, meaning you estimate the expense, meaning you estimate expenses and deduct them. Do you calculate on income post or pre-tax?
Okay, all right.
So I hope you got all that.
Yeah. And I've got the Facebook question open as well. So the question is basically, can you shed light on past year's calculation method? It is based on money that has stayed in your account, meaning you estimate expenses and deduct them. Do you calculate on income post or pre-tax? You calculate it based on post tax, right? Because the tax would be extracted from it. So that's how I would do it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and feel free to send in your questions as well. Inshallah, we'll get them looked at by experts and get answers to you via email, or you can get someone to call you, inshallah. All right, inshallah. So that concludes the session for us. And if you do have questions about what we presented today, please let us know. Email it to us, and we will get back to you, inshallah, as soon as possible. Jazakumullah khairan. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to put barakah in our work and um, to allow us to attain knowledge that is accurate and that goes back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. On top of that, it is the month of Ramadan, and we're in the last 10 nights. What a beautiful um, day and age, or the beautiful days and nights of Ramadan that we're in. And then especially we're in such a time where there is difficulty around us in terms of COVID-19. And so that is a special time that you and I are in, and we need to be very, cognizant of the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal has put us in such a time. And what are we doing in this time to help those people who need help, whether that is locally or globally? We need to, each and every one of us needs to look deep down inside and ask ourselves, what are we doing? What are we doing to help people? And what are we doing to help ourselves? A lot of us are not even thinking about ourselves, like in terms of our spiritual nutrition, in terms of our turning back to Allah Azza wa Jal and leaving that which is wrong, leaving that which is sinful, and purifying our wealth, etc., and all these things. So let us take this break, whether they call it social distancing, etc. Let us take this opportunity and all of these tragedies and these difficult times as a blessing, and retrospect within ourselves, and ponder and think of how we can improve ourselves. فجزاكم الله خيرا وبارك الله فيكم, and thank you for tuning in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.